Good evening and welcome to Evening Reports Tech Now. This week we examine the big issues behind the tech headlines with ComputerWorld New Zealand's editor Sarah Putt. Remember, if you are joining us via social media, we should be able to see your comments and questions, so do interact if you wish to. The best of these we'll include in the program. So without any other time spared and wasted, let's take a look at what we're going to cover this week. So first up, we've got government and IT. Old tech, it's got to go. So what's the new tech look like? Excessive online data collection, unfriendly databases. Why is data theft still a thing? Election 2020. Here in New Zealand, we've got elections coming. 3 tech-savvy MPs call it quits. Is the new parliament going to be tech light? And TicTok and Five Eyes. What's going on where the spies from the United States and around the Five Eyes networks, they want to spoil the dance moves on TikTok. What's that all about? And also Sarah's got a bit of an idea on a gadget or two that we will talk at. So over to Sarah, who's waiting online, and we'll pick her up here. Hello, Sarah.
Kia ora, Selwyn.
Kia ora. Now, how are things over in your end in the tech world?
Oh, well, busy as ever, lots of things happening. Like you said, we've got a bit of a program on today.
Yes.
Lots to talk about, and obviously government IT is first on the agenda.
Yeah. So tell us about that. Yeah. So this is this is an article that you've written about, or an issue you've written about in ComputerWorld New Zealand, isn't it?
Absolutely, and this is something, and also CIO. It's an issue. Well, it's not really. It's ongoing, right? I mean, government IT is the biggest consumer of IT technology in the country. I mean, it's billions of dollars in spend.
And is that common, like in Australia, or is the private sector actually the bigger?
Well, my last thing I looked at was around 40% of spend. So collectively, the biggest consumer of IT.
Yeah.
And where New Zealand is so different is, I always think back whenever I think about government IT is to the philosopher, political commentator Bruce Jesson,
Yes.
who always said other societies were government came out of society, whereas New Zealand, our society came out of our government. Wow. So it really drives so much spending and so much influence, and there's always that tension between, do you get the best technology you can ever around the world, and how much of that should be Kiwi made? And I'm not saying our providers are not up there with the best. Absolutely, in many cases they are. But always that tension.
Look, that tension. What comes to mind is the political arguments, if you like, between small government, big government. Is it a good thing that our government is actually such a dominating force within our IT sector?
Well, I think it's a fact. It's a fact of life. But what we're seeing now is this real move away from legacy systems on premise. We've talked about the cloud for forever and a day. I think pretty much we all know what that means.
I think we've got a pretty good idea.
It's easy for you and I. Yeah, we can't. It's easy for you and I and the rest of
If people have wandered into the show called Tech Now, they probably know what the cloud is.
Well, 10 years ago, not so much.
Oh, yeah.
But the problem is, the issue is, of course, that tech's right out there and it talks about all the latest and greatest. But if you've got to bring along a whole country, a team of 5 million with you, that's not an easy thing to do. And it's expensive to do that. And so what's happening is a lot of the old tech is just, it's on premise, it's not fit for purpose. And so all over the government, in lots of IT departments, they're having to face the issue of how do they move it into a different way of working within budgets that are often highly scrutinized, and in technology area that is also subject to things like official information acts and all the rest of it. Now, I'm not saying it shouldn't be.
Yeah, but
it makes a difficult environment.
On that, is government an innovator, or is it got a sea anchor of bureaucracy that drags it and slows it right down?
Well, it's department by department. So a couple of weeks ago, I did a story about Stats NZ, they had created this COVID. They had created a COVID-19 portal. I'd recommend anybody who's a data nerd to get there right now because it can hold you for some time.
Yeah.
Apparently, the average time on sites something like 15 minutes. What they've done is they've pulled all this different data together, including data from the private sector, from the banks and places like Chorus and reputable private organisations, and it's just a one-stop shop for everything you want to know around the economy and all the stats and everything else. And so there is some innovation, absolutely, and I'd highlight that as a part of the innovation.
Underscoring innovation.
But the issue is more that that there is a lot to be done. And we saw even a couple of months ago when that big health report came out from Heather Simpson, just how dire our IT systems are, partly due to the total fragmentation in the health system with, 20 or 21 DHBs.
Yep.
And they're talking about consolidating that. But also due to the fact that it's really hard to spend on IT when people are talking about, operations that can save lives and drugs that can save lives and all the rest of it. It's sometimes hard for the IT people to get in front. Couple of deployments that we've looked at this week in ComputerWorld and CIO is around the Tamariki,
yes,
our Ministry for Children.
Now, notorious at the moment, isn't it? Almost verging on infamous as opposed to a famous kind of position it's been holding. So there's obviously problems there. So it was interesting that you guys picked up a tech angle on this.
Yeah, so basically what happened is at the same time, the Chief Ombudsman report came out last week around the way that they're uplifting newborn babies. Now, everybody, anybody who's a casual observer of the news would have seen all that come out. Separately, they also their IT area put out a documents for tending for a new data analytics system. So basically trying to, what I'm talking about before, is take from an on-premise system, and they were very connected to the Ministry of Social Development from whence they came.
Yes.
And just kind of trying to split from them and create their own platform, which would enable data to be more easily accessed by frontline staff. It sounds like a simple thing to do, but it's quite a difficult process. And what they want to do is very much what big organizations want to do everywhere, which is use things like what we call as of service. So this idea that you pay continually, you don't do this big capital outlay and then upgrade the thing in 3 years or whatever.
So software as a service, yeah?
Software as a
SaaS. You see it with Adobe, for example, making it accessible for people to use Photoshop, Lightroom, etc., etc. You see it all over the place.
Xero and MYOB are perfect examples if you're in the accounting work.
Or, I've got to push, News Engine, down below us, sponsored by.
Perfect example
exactly.
Of as a service.
Yes.
Now, obviously, it's not just software, it's infrastructure, it's the whole bunch, it's the whole lot. But what I found quite amusing is when I was writing the article, I sent it through, I have a sub-editor in America, and he came back and he said, I just want to clarify, you're highlighting the area now, that you're talking about SAS, the SaaS, the company. And I said, yes, I am. And he said, it's just that I haven't seen that written in a publication of ours for a very long time, which made me realise just how much these systems need to upgrade. And the kind of mandate to do this in Oranga Tamariki was when it was formed out of the expert panel discussion document, which is like 300 pages long. But this is going back into 2015. So I think that there is, it's very difficult for IT departments in government to move quickly when they have so many stakeholders. But at the same time, they really do need to move quickly to keep ahead.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at this part here, the sub-headline, return on investment calls for cloud-based platforms. What's this part about?
So basically what we have, when I talk about on-premise, I'm thinking about, everything's within the organization. When we talk about cloud, obviously we talk about, it being housed in a data center somewhere else.
Yeah.
And obviously public cloud, the big ones, the big players are Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure and Google. That's the big sort of international global players. But also we have local players as well who also provide cloud services. And what we're really examining is why have you gone for those big two US public cloud platforms? And they're basically saying, well, we already have systems deployed in those two.
Okay, so institutionalized knowledge about how to run them.
it makes
you're saying?
sense to
Yeah.
keep going in that area.
And thus, from the point of view of scale, they're affordable. Yeah.
Yes, and what they're looking for in this particular program is a systems integrator. So that's somebody to create the system for them rather than to supply it, rather than a vendor-driven solution.
Right. So if we get back to the beginning premise on this, old tech's got to go. What's the new tech look like? So if we get back to that question, how does all of this fit into that?
Yeah, so the old tech is on premise and quite sort of stationary, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
It's not mobile. It's not somewhere that you can feel that you can access it securely and within privacy from anywhere you want.
So this is like in the days gone by. It might be your accounting system, MYOB, for example. You have it sitting there and it's inside your computer. It's not being updated. You'd have to go and get new disks, etc., etc.
That's right. They'll send out a disk every 6 months, kind of thing.
Yeah, compared to.
I do think we need to say that they're now in the as a service
Oh,
model.
absolutely. Yeah. That's absolutely, and Zero, and etc.
And all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So that's the old way of doing it. The modern way is modular. It's putting the client needs, and in this case the children's needs, at the heart of the system, and then trying to work out what kind of tech is the right course for them. The other thing as well, which Anita Easton, the IT manager in charge of this particular project, pointed out, is the great thing about an as a service is that you have continual updates. They just come through the software. They're continually being updated. And that gives them the opportunity to just get on with what they're good at doing, get on with what they're supposed to do, and not be worrying about being the minders of infrastructure.
Look, I like it myself. I like the concept. For example, in times gone by, you'd outlay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in software to basically all wrap around with your needs, and now on a monthly basis, it is affordable. And I think from the point of view of fostering innovation, software as a service has got to be embraced, doesn't it?
The whole as a service, and as you say, it's not just software anymore. It's infrastructure, it's platform, it's all sorts of things as a service.
So sorry, Sue. I was just going to jump into the next topic, if you like. Like for this here, the New Zealand Competition Watchdog to ditch the content relationship management system. Yeah, what's that?
It wants one. At the moment, this is a bit of a surprise. The Commerce Commission, this is the people that decide what big companies can merge and what can't, and basically does all the regulation for the electricity and the telcos and all the rest of it. It's doing everything off spreadsheets.
Oh wow!
So, as in all its stakeholder management. So
Excel or something.
Yeah. Just like it's doing it on, so it's keeping all its stakeholders, like all the people it talks to about all the different issues it's got. And it did tell me that one recent survey had 1,000 respondents. And I mean, this is,
wow.
They're keeping them all on spreadsheets. And of course, there's 3 branches and there's staff all over the place, and they're very, thorny issues, massively interesting and important.
That's old tech. So it's got to go.
Time to move to a dynamic CRM.
Yes,
CRM.
and there's one.
Relations management.
Sorry to butt in on that. And so there is one here that they've prioritised. Yeah.
So basically, what they're trying to do there is they have in the tender document, they've got a massive list of all the things that they would put about these different stakeholders, and so just checking there and asking really around privacy, which kind of leads us to our next topic, which is how much data should you be collecting?
You've jumped ahead of me, absolutely. And
I just asked the Commerce Commission to just check in with them on the Privacy Act, and we would hope that, and I'm sure they will comply.
Yeah, because as you alluded to, the next topic, excessive online data collection, databases. Why is data theft still such a problem?
Well, there's loads in that, but I just want to highlight something that's popped up, which is Digital Identity New Zealand, which is an organisation. It has a collection of sort of government, MB's quite involved with them, and a whole bunch of banks and people like that. And basically they're trying to innovate in this space because as consumers, as people who use online services, we're just giving away too much data, and it's just too difficult for us to kind of constantly having to provide that and to feel confident that it's doing okay.
My view on this is that we, as consumers of technology, we shouldn't be whacking ourselves, and criticising ourselves for giving away so much data when it comes down to, those basic premises of opt-in or opt-out. Yeah.
Absolutely. And also the thing is that we give it away because we want the services, and we often need them just to kind of get by in our lives and our working lives as well. Like just little things like on the subject of too much data. Why do they have, and this is Andrew Weber, who's the CEO of Digital Identity, said this to me, and I credit him with this because I think it's a fantastic point. Why do they ask us Mr., Mrs., Ms., Miss?
Yeah.
Why do they need to know that?
Yeah.
And do they have any understanding how...
Isn't there gender neutrality, yeah?
But why do you need a title, and how many people stumble over that one? Yeah. I know I do.
So you've got an answer to that question. It's not just rhetorical, is it?
Yeah. So my answer is you don't. Yeah. You've got to ask yourself, and this is an organisation and a business thing, if it's just because it's in your CRM, your customer relations management, if you're the ComCom, no, it's a bit mean. If you're that, then why do you need it? You've got to really ask yourself, why do I need this data? How is it going to help me provide that service to that customer or that client or whatever? And if it's not going to help, only take what you need.
You mean the service? Only take, yeah. There's a thing with
only take the data that you need.
We're actually beaming into Facebook at the moment, live, and then it goes on demand as soon as we finish, etc., into other platforms like Twitter as well, and YouTube, etc. So all of that simultaneously. So there's obviously a service there that we're getting, even what we're talking about here. I have switched off everything possible in Facebook, but I can tell I'm still profiled by the type of adverts that are presenting. I'm supposed to have adverts turned off, but they are still getting into my feed. They're getting into everywhere. For example, I mentioned to you a wee while ago about an auto cue. So it just makes my poor tired brain takes an easy approach when we first start the program. And I mentioned about an auto cue. I've been inundated with adverts for auto cues ever since.
Yeah.
From the Facebook platform. So, the data that we're giving away, and even when we opt out and spend an hour or so going through it, it's still beating us to it.
Well, this is the other thing that's happened, is that a lot of people now are just like what you've done. It's certainly something that was highlighted, especially around the Cambridge Analytica issue that popped up 2 years ago, and we saw how the incredible ripples of that ended up in. But again, this guy Andrew was saying people have a begrudging acceptance now, and what they've done is they surveyed them last year. And I'm just going to throw you a site. So in a social media last year, when they surveyed 1,000 New Zealanders, typical kind of 3% margin of error, so pretty reputable kind of thing. 57% had made changes to their social media because of what you talked about. Yeah. And this year, only 39% had.
So we've got reticent.
Yeah, and he said on the face of it, it looks apathetic, but they did qualitative research. They talked to quite a number of the people they surveyed, and this kept coming up again and again. I just kind of get now.
Yeah. But wasn't there a push last year at the US Congress, for example, and the Senate, if I remember right, to try and get opt-in as the standard?
There has been so much, in this area, and if you're thinking about how they are governed in the US, that is part of an issue, but it's not the issue that we saw come through recently when Facebook was under.
Oh, this was last week.
You
spoke about it on the program the week before that.
And
but I'm talking about in the wake of Cambridge Analytica. And you saw Mark Zuckerberg there being grilled by, Congress. You're getting grilled by the Senate, albeit that what it did show was a lot of the representation in the United States as Congress and Senate was probably not that tech savvy. But at the same time, the message was out there. There was a lot of discussion about a fundamental shift from having to opt out to actually opt into these things. And that just seemed to have fizzled out, hasn't it?
But it does. You see, what happens is they come under, they promise things change, but then they just keep, but it's really hard to be vigilant. And so there's a couple of things I want to unpack here. The first thing is the Congress. Okay, so when they appeared last week, that issue wasn't there. It was two things. If you are a Republican, all you cared about was the fact that there seemed to be two issues. For the Republican side, it was the fact that you're not giving the conservative politicians a fair go, that you're being too weighted to the other side, which can be argued either way. If you were a Democrat, the issues that they were concerned about is whether or not the company should be broken up. They're too big. They grilled Mark Zuckerberg on his Instagram acquisition, which is going back something like 9 years, seven, I think it's 2011. I think so. That's too far gone. I mean, so those were the issues they were hot on. They were hot on the other issues, what you talked about, when after he was in front of them. But they seem to have learnt their lesson, and they did a little bit more homework this time. But if you want a really regulated environment, you need to go to Europe, because that's in the European Commission that's where they've got the big data law, big privacy laws, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I had to kind of working in that IT area with various content management and the OSI services that my business provides. I had to really have that nailed down, and so that we complied. I notice even now, getting emails from Google and the data platforms even today, with respect to more compliance with the EU. So clearly where these big federal bodies, at the very least, put their line down and say you've got to comply, or there's massive consequences here, there is some sort of movement. Yeah. So is that where the solutions lay, is at those big bodies?
Well, it's so interesting you should say that, because we often now talk about three internets. Like the internet was the thing that was going to unite the world, and everybody was going to have free form. And then let's face it, people worked out you could make a lot of money off it, and things have changed. So there's kind of three internets in the world. There's the Chinese internet, which is only if the Chinese Parliament think it's a good idea. We're not even in the Chinese.
With a massive wall bigger than the Chinese wall.
Yeah, it's Google, Twitter, all the rest of them, they can't even operate over there. Then you've got the regulated internet, which is the European Parliament and what they're doing. And then you've got a sort of free bikes for all, which is the US kind of internet, which is kind of where New Zealand sits in a funny sort of way. It's kind of not, it's not heavily regulated. It's all about freedom of expression and freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff. So you've got the sort of developing these kind of different, if you like, internets. And Australia seems very much more along moving towards the what I would call the European internet.
Yes, we've seen that with its stance toward Google, for example.
And around encryption and things like that. So
don't steal our content. And Google kicked back on that, though, didn't it?
There's all sorts of different things that have popped up, and they feel that. There's the issues around encryption. There's the issues around whether Facebook's regulation following those awful, the March massacres in Christchurch. There's so many different. They've been very knee-jerk and quite reactive, whereas New Zealand's been a lot more hands-off. Now we have a Privacy Act being renewed, coming into effect in December. It does not have the same level of the same high bar as what the GDPR, which is the European privacy laws have. So that's really interesting. We're still kind of a little bit towards the
Well, that kind of segues into, election 2020. We've obviously got elections here in New Zealand. As you have pointed out, there are 3 tech-savvy MPs that are calling it quits. So the question, is the new parliament going to be tech light?
Well, I'm sort of waiting a little bit for some more policy to come out before I kind of have a look at all what the
That's fair.
Because we know, the National's been releasing policy on this and that in the last couple of days. We're told that Labor doesn't seem to think it wants to, but let's find out. I don't have an insight to any of that. So I wanted to give it a couple of weeks and see what they did, because it doesn't. the issue around tech is for politicians is that it's not an easy sell for them. The risk of coming across like those Congress people a couple of years ago as just not being up to date, of not really knowing your stuff, is quite high.
Yeah.
It's not an easy topic. And at the same time, are the gains really there? Because the ICT portfolio has always kind of sat on the edge, on the margins. It's always been the sort of the one that's sort of ranked 18th, 19th in cabinet, not the one that's ranked 1 or 2.
Except for Nikki Kay, obviously well respected, and she's one of the 3 that is bowing out, of course.
Yeah. Nikki Kay did a really great thing. She championed digital technologies, the curriculum change in schools. And many in IT would argue that it didn't go far enough, but let's face it, she got it in there, and I think that's been a great thing that's come out this year is compulsory in schools and I'm talking from year 0.
Yeah.
5-year-olds all the way up to probably about 15. I have to translate what we used to call 3rd and 4th form. What do we call that now?
Oh, don't put it to me. Don't put it to me. That's mean. Putting that one on.
I actually had children who go to and I can't get it. So
Yeah. So some of the things. What would you expect to come out of the policy sets that are put before the voting public in the next few weeks?
Let's face it, it's the only person who's probably going to, is a few of us in tech. And as I said, you don't necessarily make your decisions when you, when you look through the tech policies.
Yeah.
I was going to say the notable exception was the national government, the John Key government, that put through the ultra-fast broadband and the rural broadband initiatives.
Yeah.
That gave us, and you have to, see that.
Of course, others would say that the ground had already been well and truly sown on that by the unbundling of the loop. So that's the other side of that. It was made possible for Key and Co to roll out because of the work that had been done in the previous parliament. Yeah.
Totally. Kudos to David Cunliffe for his work in that, and then picked up by Stephen Joyce, seen through by Amy Adams. Really, it was a multi kind of thing. So I think what you want to see is some really interesting understanding about the power of government IT, about a need to kind of have a good conversation and to drive it so that IT people in these departments can understand and can be supported in the decisions that they make. There have been some good deployments, and those should be highlighted. That you want to have a discussion around innovation and encouraging innovation. There's a little bit of that, of anything in tech, of any area in tech, that's the one that's the most developed. Things like the Elevate Fund, which is this $300 million VC fund, which is sort of a fund of funds.
So we've moved on from the policies that were campaigned on last time round. The Callaghan group, the high end of town kind of argument that the National Party was supporting, and Labor was pushing the tax credits and the tax certificate. Now we seem to have developed through this current parliament that's wrapped up, where there's a merge between the two ideas, if you like. Now this is taking it further, isn't it? It
is. And so you're there's been a recognition that capital for not so much startups, it's a 3 million to 10 million. I think that's around that kind of group. It's kind of they're not big enough to be really kind of attractive to the big guns, but they're not startups either. They've got something that's really viable and ready to go. So, but having said that, so there's that innovation piece, but there's also the piece around what we talked before about, where does social media play? How do you protect people online? What, all of that kind of stuff. How do you, the Kiwi made versus whether or not you go with, the big players. And there's lots of discussions, and it would be good to see that stuff kind of coming out a little bit more.
Okay.
How can we use data to improve healthcare?
Yeah. Some really big gains there, and use the technologies that are available to us to actually benefit lives of ourselves, the environment, obviously, and animals that we have around us, etc. Look, we're talking about big players. You can't get much bigger than these two things. TikTok, huge, particularly, obviously, not for me. But and the Five Eyes spy networks, and this thing where the Five Eyes under the command of Donald Trump. wants to take away the dance moves of TikTok, wants to ban it. Let's just have a look at this very quickly. I've got a bit of a clip here, Sarah, and I'll bring it up. Let's see if I can. The BBC, there it is. Donald Trump. Treasury should get a cut of the TikTok deal. They're actually talking about that. It sounded that this is, BBC and others are saying this is like mafia tactics, and all of this stuff. It's really good theatre. But what is TikTok? Some people out of the generation don't know what TikTok is. Look at this.
TikTok was the world's 4th most downloaded app, topping Instagram and Snapchat. The company behind it is now valued at $75 billion.
That's a lot of payback going back to the Treasury in the United States if they want a cut of all the work that Donald Trump's doing to try and sell this deal that's going through. If you look just down here, there's a little bit more about the resistance here, perhaps.
It's been banned and reinstated there before, same as
I'll
in
just back up
about
a
the
little
role
bit.
that a Chinese-owned app now plays in all of our lives.
And there, our connection has dropped, so we'll just turn that off and get back to what do you make of all this? What's going on?
Okay, well, so TikTok, for those people who, I guess are over 25 years old, it's an app, and it basically sends you 15-second videos, and it's all user-generated, and it's just massive. I mean, in America alone, there's 100 million users, and it's obviously wonderful area for advertisers. It's just gone absolutely viral in the last.
So let's cut to the chase. Is TikTok nicking? Is it stealing data of our young people?
So what's happened is that it's got itself right in the middle of a geopolitical stoush. You don't want to be between China and US right now.
Yeah, geopolitics.
Now, there is this idea that that the Communist Party in China can access the data of its users. Now TikTok say, we've got servers in Singapore and Virginia. We don't do that, and even can we? So this is discussion as whether or not it's even possible. But Donald Trump, the Americans have been saying for some time now, for a couple of months now, hey, we actually think you need to stop this app. That it needs to. We don't want it anymore. We don't want it if there's a risk that this data can be in Chinese.
Is Trump just going for a deal here? Microsoft is making a move into the social media phenomenon, isn't it? And it's been left behind. So isn't Trump doing some of his corporate mates a bit of a favour?
It's not unprecedented. So India.
Yep, it's banned it. Yep.
Because outlawed it in their country for a while because they were having a border dispute with Beijing.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's coming from a completely out there phenomenon. It's not like you're saying, oh, he just made this up, because there is evidence or there is suggestions. It's a bit like Huawei. It's really hard to know. It's really hard to know if this should be a concern or not. Yeah. And there's so many things, so many smoke and mirrors. It's very hard to know.
I could take you down rabbit holes there, but you'd say, do not do that. It's a tech program. Yeah.
So what I would say is, I think it's very interesting. So the first thing is, it either goes, and then of course he becomes unpopular because the kids like it.
Yeah.
It's popular. So the solution is, okay, Microsoft, you buy it, and Microsoft will says, well, 100 million users. I mean, we're pretty used to kind of, spending laying down a few billion on this, that, and the other thing. We could do with shoring up our consumer space. But then he comes out, like what you pointed out, and says, well, we'll take a cut of the deal, thanks, for the Treasury. And I mean, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
That's just out there.
That's like, obviously the style of business deals that he's done in the past when he's representing Trump Towers or something like that. So that seems to be way out there,
I mean, up until now, and then, so what he said is to Microsoft and to TikTok, you've got to make the deal by the 15th of September or it's no go. And what Microsoft is buying is the TikTok app in America, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand.
Yeah, the Five Eyes.
Yeah, and the only one is UK, but it might be because the UK is still stuck up into the whole kind of European Union, and I understand that the Brexit doesn't fully come in till January and all of that kind of stuff.
So it really does boil down to that question that the answer seems to be elusive. Is China, via TikTok, stealing the data of our young people? If it is, well, then in some ways you can actually justify the stance. If it isn't, or, there's that other part, isn't it? All the other social media we've talked earlier on in this very program. It's wholesale theft of data, and is TikTok any different? We'll get back to that, don't we?
Well, TikTok's owned by a company called ByteDance,
Yep.
which is a Chinese company.
Yeah.
However, it has an app in China, which is pretty much, it's called Douyin, I think.
Yeah.
Excuse my Mandarin. It's called that, and this one's called TikTok. And what they have is their secret sauce is this algorithm which understands everything about its users and shoots these 15-second videos at them constantly, and they're stuck on it. Like, these young people are spending up to 80 minutes a day on this thing.
Wow.
I can't imagine what it does to the young mind.
Yeah, but that's another story, isn't it?
But that's another story.
Yeah.
But so what's interesting is, as well, from a tech perspective, is how do you cut it up? How do you divorce what do you give them the algorithm? How do you make it so that...
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's fascinating.
Country.
And
and TikTok can run them.
Okay. And Microsoft gets it. Do they push a opt-in, opt-out type of thing like we were talking before? Or do they just benefit from nicking all that data and then commercialising it and selling it off in any way they want to package it?
Well, I think what it does is it joins their kind of family of...
yeah, but it still gets back to the data thing, doesn't it? Because that's the premise of the whole thing.
Probably more... I think the more compelling option is having that app right in the space of... right in a very key demographic. And they've never succeeded that well in consumer, although they have bought Minecraft, which is big, that kind of group. And they did buy LinkedIn, so they do understand social media. I'm not saying that they don't want the data, but they want the data to sell your stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas the Chinese might want the data to move into a situation like Hong Kong.
Yeah. I just see the whole thing as being an absolute mess from the point of view of data. In that privacy issues that haven't been resolved. It's been packaged as an excuse. Is it okay, for example, for New Zealand data of all of us to be traded by the likes of Microsoft and all of the others, but it's not okay for the Chinese to do that? There's no clarity from what I can see, unless you're able to point out clarity.
No, well, yeah. I mean, that's what we've talked about, is the fact that we don't know.
You don't know.
And it's the argument around TikTok was originally started around Huawei. And you can ask Spark down the road what they think of that, because they weren't allowed to build a network with Huawei.
Yeah, and others. Yeah.
And others. So that was an example. And then now it's moved into social apps.
Yeah.
So there's that. That is one topic.
Yes.
The second topic is, what are they doing with the data? Well, I would argue that probably Microsoft just wants to sell you more stuff.
Yeah.
But where the Chinese issue comes from is the political regime there. I mean,
okay, you see a difference there.
In Hong Kong.
Okay, well, let's wrap it up, Sarah. Great conversation, obviously, and really, you really peeled back the layers. So thanks very much for that. Thank you for those that have joined us on Evening Reports Tech Now with Sarah Putt and myself. Hope you have a great week, and take care.